Oh boy, some of those announcers.
Oh, it's terrible.
Why? Why don't you like the announcers?
Well, they know more than
They-
anybody else. They know just exactly
They know what the
should do.
manager's going to do before he does it.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
All you can hear from Dizzy Dean is what he shot on his last hunting trip or fishing trip.
yeah, yeah.
Poor little old what's his name?
Yeah, he got Pee-wee
Pee-wee
talking like him.
talking like him now.
Really?
Oh, yes, I did this and I did that.
Pee-wee?
Yeah.
Yes, I wish Pee-wee had it done.
Seems the minute they, one of them get up in front to talk,
That's funny.
they
That's too
start on
bad.
what they did. What did anybody care what I did? That's years ago. I went in there for Bill McKechnie, with Bill rather. Oh, well, back in '36, and we went out early because I got Barney Dreyfus to take Charlie Grimm after his scout turned him down. See, I give Dreyfus my opinion of Billy Southworth, Charlie Grimm. Of course, Billy Southworth was taken up already, but Barney wanted me to, that back in '18. I was in Chattanooga that year. Was that 18 or 9? Yeah, 18. Yeah, because I was in Texas 19. Well, anyway.
See, no matter how cheap Barney was, you still did him favors, didn't you?
Well, of course, people don't understand that. I've had a lot of people, I've never said anything, but if it hadn't been for Barney, I would never had a chance. And I think I paid him back for it, though.
Yeah.
The only thing, I tell you what, Barney, what he got sore at me for, you know, Barney was pretty slick. He never wanted to have it said that he made a certain decision if it went wrong. But if it went right, it was his deal.
Mm.
And what started, he and I, you see, I lived in Cleveland. Fred Clark lived out in Kansas. And Fred and I were just like that after that first day, that foot race. And he even wanted me to room with him. Well, now, who wants to room with the manager?
Yeah.
So, of course, I was a kid, and I roomed with him for about a month. And one of the players come and told me, said, get away from him, you're going to hurt yourself. Said, some of us fellas are going to go out someplace, and he's going to find it out, and you're going to get blamed for carrying tales.
Yeah.
So I went to Fred and put it right to him. Of course, he didn't like it. He said he wanted somebody to talk to nights. Well, I told him that I would rather have it the other way. I said, I'd come up and visit you. But I said, as far as roommate, everybody has told me the same thing. So he said, all right, and he had to change. But what I was going to try to get across to you was this Tom Clark. Did you ever hear of Tom Clark?
No, not
Catcher?
No.
Well, I played with him in Cincinnati. And no, it was Nig Clark I had up in Rochester. Tom Clark was he was a good catcher, but he was another, liked his beer and didn't go so long. But when I went out with Bill McKechnie that day to the ballpark. You see, Bill had a big breakfast. He'd have a steak and potatoes and tomatoes, all what anybody else would have for supper, he'd have for breakfast. Then he wouldn't eat until around 7 o'clock. And he was a great fellow to walk. And he asked me, he says, have you kept up your walking? And I says, yeah, quite a bit. He says, let's walk out the ballpark. Well, I didn't know where I was in Chicago, you see. I always went out on a L or a cab or something. And of course, when I was playing there, I lived up on, do you know Chicago?
Pretty well.
Western Avenue.
Mhm.
Up and around Western Avenue, right near the old West Side ballpark. And we walked out, I suppose between 12 and 1 o'clock when we got there, and they were kids, youngsters were getting dressed and going out, and we were back up in the stand talking to the umpires, and finally I walked down. I wanted to see Charlie Grimm, he was managing then, and Tom Clark. They were the only ones I knew. And I talked with them a little while at the railing, and you know there's a rule in baseball, nobody can go on the bench, or there was, I don't know whether it is now or not, because these folks visit so much among themselves. We never would visit with an opponent, you know. No, they were enemies. And Tom Clark said, come on down on the bench. I says, I know the rules, Tom. I says, they don't want nobody in civilian clothes down there. He says, listen. He says, they don't come out for batting practice for over a half hour yet. Come on down. He says, I want to talk to you. So I went down. We were sitting there talking a little bit, and he looked up other end of the bench. He says, say, see that kid up there? He was putting on his shoes and just lacing them up. I said, yeah, he's pretty young, isn't he? He says, young. He says, he's a little older than what he looks, but he says, as far as ideas go, he is young. He said, I want to tell you something about him. Now, this is a sample of what the kids are today, and he's a good sample. He says, we're in Pittsburgh, just like we are now, putting on our shoes. This kid edged over to me, and he says, who is that bow-legged, gray-headed fellow over there? Clark said, looked at him, he said, don't you know who that is? No, he said, I don't. He says, how long have you been in the league? Well, he said, I guess I'm going on my 3rd year. And you don't know who that is? He says his name is Wagner, Hannes Wagner. The kid finished the shoe, and he sat there studying a minute. And he looked at Tom, and he said, did he ever play ball? Now that's how much they know.
No kidding.
Did he ever play ball? Now, I could see that with me. I've sat around hotels and I've had a lot of fun. In the mornings, you see, especially now in New York, we would stay at the one hotel for New York and Brooklyn, because both of them had dressing rooms, and we'd go in either underground or over to the park. And this one day in particular, I was sitting down in the lobby. I always got up around 8 o'clock, never much later than that, and maybe before that. And I was sitting there in the lobby, and as the fellows come down, they'd all say, "Hello, Tom." Go on by, and there's a fellow sitting in a chair alongside of me. Well, he was sitting 2 or 3 chairs away, and he finally come over and sat on the side of me. He says, "Do you know all those fellows?" I says, "I know most of them." He says, "Aren't they the ball club?" I said, "Yeah." About that time, this was way back, Rube Waddell comes through the lobby, and he said, "Hello, Tom." I said, "Hello, Rube. How are you this morning?" "Oh, fine." He said, "I'm going out and get something to eat." See, they used to give us meal money, pay our room rent, and give us meal money. So when he'd gone, he said, "You call that fellow Rube, is that Rube Waddell?" I said, "Yeah, that's Rube." And he says, "You know all of them?" "Yes, I know pretty near all of them." And, well, he says, "You mentioned pretty near all of them, but he said, now there's one fellow you haven't mentioned." He says, "Where's Leach?" Well, I says, if he hadn't gone out, he'd be down here pretty soon. But I used to get that every once in a while. Now here's another one. This is really funny.
They didn't believe you were a ball player.
No, oh no. This, the first couple of years, the Polo Ground's the only place we ever dressed. And we had these little, we call them uniform roads. You could roll your uniform up and just pick it up and carry it. And we had to carry them ourselves. So I used to always wait at the Polo Grounds and catch one of the other fellows and go out with him. And of course I'd have the roll, and they'd never ask me who I was or what I was or anything, because I was with one of the players they knew. But this one day, for some reason, I didn't get anybody. I just come out by myself. So when I got up to the pass gate, this fella says, "Well, whose roll you got, buddy?" Well, I said, "It happens to be my own." He says, "Your own?" I said, "Yeah." I started going, "Oh no." He said, "You're so kind of find it fresh now. You just wait here, and the fellow owns that comes along. If he wants to take you in, all right." Well, I said, "You better make up your mind, mister, because you're going to be in trouble if you keep me here." I said, "That's my own uniform, and I should be in there getting dressed now." "Yes," he said, "it's your uniform. We'll find out." He kept me there an hour and a half. And then the only way I got in, one of the Giants come along, and he started to go through the gate, and he stopped and he said, "Well, what are you doing out here? Who are you waiting for?" I said, "I'm just waiting for this dumb scholar to let me in." "He won't let you in?" I said, "No." He says, "He even made me lay my uniform down there." He looked at the fellow, he said, "You better let him in."
I bet he let you in after that.
Huh?
He let you in after that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he had to be sure, though. He said, "You mean to say he's a ball player?" "Well," he said, "he is. And you better be a ticket taker. Because if you keep him out here, you won't be taking tickets much longer." So he finally let me in.
You said something before. You said that interested me. You said that it wasn't the ball players that were so rough. It was the fans.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they'd, after the game, they didn't bother you through the game, call your names or anything, but after the game, in St. Louis one day, the worst I run into, we didn't have sweaters. We had coats, regular coats made to wear going, because we had to ride out in the bus.
You
And
rode out in your uniform.
in our uniform, yeah, dressed in a hotel. This day, it was a good thing we lost. At one game, I was tickled to death to lose. And St. Louis had a lot of old timers, all good ball players. And we were 3 games ahead of them. They were in second place. And we had what I thought was the best ball club I was ever on until we got harness in at shortstop. And then I changed my mind. He changed it for me. Well, they had Jess Burkett, Henrik, Jack, Lou Krieger. He was a catcher. Jack O'Connor was a catcher. Bobby Wallace was at short. I forget who was second, and they had most of the time Big Schreckenghost, that was the catcher that used to catch Rube Waddell. They had him playing first base. And they had a fellow named Donovan in right field. That's about all I can remember. That was back in 1900. And it was ding-dong all the way through fight. One riding another one and all that stuff. And when the game was over, they win. We come into the bench to change into our sneakers. And I happen to look around, I'm alone. And I hadn't had my sneakers on yet. So I put them on and started down the field. The bus was clear down to the left field fence. Back of a stand down there, and we had to walk that whole distance down there. And I guess I walked by from here at the door and I felt something pull up my coat. I never looked around at all. I just stopped, stood there. When they loosened up on it, I started walking. They walked me the whole length of that field that way. I never looked, I never saw who they were or anything else. I knew if I looked around, somebody was going to take a punch at me.
It was fans.
Huh?
It was fans.
Yeah. Stand, and they wouldn't do nothing. So when we got down to the bus, they let loose of me. And everybody moved up in the bus. They knew there was going to be things thrown at us. So I had to take the end seat. And we had a bat boy. We always used to meet us there and take care of our bats. And I got up in the bus, and this bat boy was standing on the step. And another fellow was standing on this side. And I just looked at him, I said, "Who are you, bud?" "Oh," he says, "I'm helping the bat boy." "Oh," I says, "All right," and I turned around just like I did. He plucked and jumped.
Wow.
And this bat boy, the fella hit the horses at the same time, and this bat boy off on top of this kid. And I guess they had it because the police took him in. And that night, in the hotel, we had to get the secretary to go down to the station and get this kid out. And told him, pay any fine, we'd make good. But they didn't fine him, they turned him loose. So that was what you had to watch for when the game was over. Baltimore was a bad town. The others wasn't so bad, Baltimore and St. Louis.
What about when you went to the park in the morning, before the game?
Well, we didn't go, we came out in the bus, you see.
Yeah, but what about when you went to the park in the bus? You went to the park in the bus? Or
No,
by
we
yourself?
stopped down there and had to walk up to the bench.
Well, you mean, what time did you get to the park?
Oh, we got to the park, you see, it was that year they made the ruling that they had to give us 15 minutes batting practice.
Were the fans of any bother to you
No,
when you came
no.
to the park in the morning?
No, this day what started, it was one of our players. He was nuts. We told him he hadn't been with us long, and we were taking our batting practice. Of course, there wasn't many in the ballpark then. And somebody fouled the ball up in the stand. Well, they used to, some of the places, they go up after the ball and give whoever had the ball a ticket for the next day or whenever he wanted to come to give up the ball. And this day, this player went up to take the ball away from him. Kind of funny, crazy loon thing to think he could go up into a crowd and take a ball away from a fan. Well, that's what started it. They didn't bother him. They let him down out of there, but they sure laid for us after it was over. Well, another thing, there was one big fella tried to get up in the bus to get at Fred Clark, and Fred was, he would fight anybody. Not with his hands, no matter what he had. He didn't fight with his hands. But he carried a gun in his grip too. Now that should never get out.
You're telling me they weren't tough and rough in those days, and they were all sweet, nice people, and now you tell me he carried a gun in his grip.
Well, I don't think he'd use it. He may and he may not, but this fellow, when he tried to get up in the bus after him, Fred got out of his seat and come out towards the end to him, and he slapped at him with his shoe. And I think that had a lot to do with the rest of it, because he could have cut his face to pieces with them spikes. But we had a fast ride back to that hotel now,
Yes.
I'll tell you that.
It was a horse-drawn
Yeah,
bus.
yeah.
Yeah. In the 1909 World Series, you weren't nervous before that one either?
Mm. No, we had a ball game to play, and that's all there was to it. The only thing we got on the pitcher. We didn't have a pitcher to open. We had 3 pitchers we were going to depend on, and all 3 of them were sick.
Yeah.
Something wrong with them. And we had this youngster that had a good season. Well, Clark was this way. If he couldn't exactly make up his mind, he'd get 3 or 4 of the fellows together that he thought were dependable and ask their opinion what to do. And I see where somebody, some outsider claimed he was connected with baseball, but he claims he told Fred to pitch Adams in that first ball game. I don't know whether he did or not, but I know there was 3 of us told him when he got us together and asked what to do. We told him put Adams in there, and he had the control, and we had a good big ballpark, and we could roam around out there. And always thought that's what made him pitch Adams. Well, they hit Adams pretty hard the first 2 or 3 innings, but we were going getting them. And well, along about 2nd or 3rd inning, they got a couple of men on base, and Cobb got a hold of one. It was really hit, but it was caught. Went out and got it. And when we come in, he walked over to the fella and he says, well, if you fellas will go get him like that, I can get him in there if you'll keep getting him. Well, he beat him. I don't remember the score.
That's the year Adams won 3 games in that series, isn't it?
Yeah. None of those fellas got right.
Was it Leafield?
Liefeld.
Liefeld, Willis?
Yeah, Willis.
And Kamnitz or something like that.
Kamnitz.
Yeah.
Kamnitz, Willis, and Liefeld. You see, we'd have had a good pitching staff going in there. Without this kid, he'd probably never got into a game.
Yeah, isn't that funny? That's a series too, that Cobb didn't get to steal but 1 base the whole series. And Honus stole about 6.
Well, I give Cobb credit for stealing home base. He never stole home base. Gibson had that ball standing waiting for him. And he slid right into him and still was called safe.
Did Gibby drop the ball?
No. Oh no, we put up a hubbub, but didn't do any good. I don't remember whether it was Clem or the other fellow was the American League umpire. Oh, it's funny, I can't think of his name.
Is it true that Clem never missed a ball or a strike?
Yeah, none of them can do it.
Did you argue with him a lot?
Well, you know your limit with him. Most of us did. But Fred Clark could call him more things, and there was 2 fellas. I learned a lot of curse words. Fred Clark and Frank Chance. I asked Frank one day, I says, Frank, where do you learn that stuff?
They say McGraw was pretty good at that too.
Clem, well, I got a compliment one time from Mrs. Clark. I don't know, for some reason, she and Fred always liked me. And I could do anything, and no matter what I'd do, they'd find some excuse for it. And well, they never questioned me. I went out for practice when I felt like it, and I asked him one day, why? Well, he says, you're always in good condition, you know how to keep in shape, and I've never seen you out of shape, so I'm going to let you go. Well, I thanked him for it. I said I'd probably play longer for it, but one time he did. He asked me, he says, come out tomorrow, and 3 or 4 days, he says, I heard a couple of them discussing you not having to come out here, and I'd like to have you come out. So I did. Of course, I never questioned anything he said. If he told me to do anything, I'd try. And I would tell him, we had a bunch that wasn't afraid to go to Fred and tell him when we thought he was wrong. And that's what he liked. He says, you fellas know as much baseball as I do. I don't know it all. Come and tell me. And if he made a mistake and we didn't jump all over him, he'd come in the bench and cuss us out. What's the matter with you fellas? You saw me make a mistake. Why don't you say something? I don't think that Fred Clark ever fined a man a nickel.
Really?
I don't think so. He said one time he never would fine a man. He'd get him off the ball club, though, if he didn't behave himself.
How come, was Wagner a particularly fast man? I mean, running
Fast?
speed?
I think I was the only one ever beat him in a
He was
100-yard
200
race.
pounds, though.
Huh?
He was 200 pounds. He was a big man.
No, 190 when he was playing. And he was 5'11".
When I see pictures of him with his bow legs, you
Yeah.
know, he looks like a beer keg, squat, heavy.
Mhm.
And I always found it hard to figure out how come he could be so fast.
Hannes was a peculiar fellow. When Hannes, he joined the club, I think in '97. Of course, I wasn't there. All I know about that part of it is what I heard talk and different things. He was playing second base. And they had a fella they got from Cincinnati with dummy Hoy for a couple of pitches, named Richie. And they switched Richie to second base and Hannes to third. Of course, Hannes played any place. I seen him play first base that you couldn't beat. And in fact, I had managed the club one day that Fred was out. There was something happened to him and he didn't come along on the trip. And we had a young feller that would always show up if we got short of players, lived in Cincinnati. He was nothing but a semi-pro. He wouldn't sign a contract. He'd always be ready, though. He and his brother were whiskey men, whiskey dealers. And Fred had got spiked up in here, and he come pretty near in his leg. And he was in the hospital. He wanted Hannes to take the ball club on this eastern trip. And of course I didn't know that at the time, but I went up just the day before we were going on the trip. I went up to the hospital to see him, and he asked me about taking charge of the club on the trip. Now I says, Fred, put Hannes in there. I says, just give it to him. I says, I don't care about it. I'm satisfied, everything my way. I don't know about Hannes. I says, he's got a streak in him we don't know yet. And, well, he says, tell you the truth, Tom, he says, I want him to take it, and he said to give it to you. Well, I'll talk to him, I said. I'll come back tonight. So I talked to him. He said, yeah, you go ahead, take it, and we'll all help you. Well, Philadelphia was our first play. And I was having trouble with my side at that time. Every once in a while, I get a stitch in here, and I just keel over. It wouldn't happen maybe once a year. Maybe I'd go through a year without it. Maybe I'd have it once or twice. But I'd be about 3 days before the pain would leave, and I'd be all right again. And there was no use of me trying to play because I'd have trouble standing up. And, well, we had a hotel down in the town part. Was you ever in Philly?
Sure.
Well, you know where the big fella stands up on the top of the building, Broad Street and
Benjamin
Chestnut.
Franklin thing.
Down Chestnut Street was a hotel, Albin or Albine or. We stayed there and we'd get our bus there. They'd come up there with the bus and we'd be all in uniform and we'd go up one block and turn and go right straight out to the ballpark. And they had the streetcar tracks then. And as we come up there, we made the turn. The front wheel, no, the back wheel, front wheels, that's right, got caught in these tracks, streetcar tracks. And they tore loose from the body of the bus, and we all went over on the side. Well, Bransfield was our first baseman. He broke his toe.
You're managing this club now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even in uniform, but I went out with him. And of course we were going to play this kid in the outfield. That's what I intended to do, but when Bransfield went out, Gibby was with us then, yeah. Gibby and I were working together on it. I said, Gibby, I says, what do you think about putting this kid on short and Hannes on first? I said, we know Hannes can play first. We know this kid can play short. What if we work it some other way? We don't know what's going to happen. Well, it just done you good to watch them two play that day. I never saw such playing. This kid coming up with everything anywhere near him. Noel Hannes reaching out, one either big hand, you know. And anyway, and we won the ball game. And we had a utility man playing left field. We didn't have, well, let's see. We had a young fellow just come in playing in my place at third. This kid at short, Hannes at first, and our regular second baseman was the only man playing regular position. And those two, I think Hannes had 14 chances that day, and the kid had 13 at shortstop. Never a sign of a bobble one way or the other. So, you know, we went through with that ball club. Of course, I was out that series, but we went through that series and won 12 out of 15 ball games.
Wow. Wow. You said before that you couldn't hit. How did you learn to hit?
Well, I had 2 or 3 fellows up home, like I told you, the old professionals. And I put it up to them. I studied all winter long, all the time, thinking, why I go down here and hit any place I want to hit anything and go up there and I can't hit a lick on earth. Am I scared or what? But I wasn't nervous, didn't feel nervous, and I could handle the balls, never any trouble, and I finally got thinking it over. The pitching is different. There's something about this pitching. And finally, I went to one old fella and I put it right straight to him. I says, why can't I hit that better pitching? He says, it's too fast for you. He says, you're out on the end of that bat, hitting these kids, and you hit them wherever you want it. Now, he said, you got to shorten up on that bat and push, punch. I said, all right, I'll try. And that's where I wound up hitting.
Yeah, compare that to today, where you see people, shortstops, third baseman, second baseman,
Yeah.
all swing from the end of the bat. Why do they do that?
I don't like,
Why are they all swinging for a home run?
I'll tell you something about hitting. They say you can't learn a man to hit. I learned 3 men to jump 50 points in their hitting, and still I couldn't get a job. I learned Walter Holke from a 250 hitter. He led the lead the year I had him and hit 352. He was hitting 250 in June, but he stuck to what I told him. And he went up there, and McGraw kept him 6 years after. And I had, down here in Tampa, I had 2 different fellas there. One of them, sold him to, well, I didn't sell him, but I mean, I took him out there and showed him why he couldn't hit the better pitching. He was hitting at the show, at the swing, at the man's bluff.
At the pitcher's motion, huh?
Yeah, and the way I got onto that, I was putting it through, and I was hitting better when I was in my late 30s than I was before. Because I not only was hitting where they were moving away to play me someplace, but I was meeting the ball better. Of course, I was having a little more luck too. You got to have that luck to hit. I don't care what you say. I don't care who you are. And I'll show you an example of it. One of them, the booster's a great hitter, Yogo Berra. Did you ever watch him any time? Did you ever see him hit a ground ball at an infielder?
I don't remember.
You never did. He had that luck when he hit a ground ball, it was right between them. The poor hitter, the ground ball would be right at him. That's the difference in your good hitter and your poor hitter.
I've seen him hit a mighty lot of foul home runs, though.
Yeah, I would rather, if I was a pitcher, I'd rather pitch against Yogo than I would Mickey Mantle in a pinch with men on there, because Yogo's got the luck. Mantle has only the power. He isn't as good a hitter today as he was the first year he played ball.
Mantle?
No. And he isn't as good a fielder. He never has learned a thing. That's why I asked, what did the coaches do up there?
Yeah.
You
You
can
learn.
learn.
Why is it that they all do swing for a home run now? Why is it that...
That's what they pay off on.
Well, of course, there's some like Nellie Fox, you know, if more people did like he...
Well, he had some good hitters surrounding him.
Yeah,
Now, Wally Burger
Wally Berger.
played with Boston. I scouted for them went in there in '36. That's when Bill McKechnie was up there. Bill got me the job, and Bob Quinn. If they'd stayed there, I'd have still been working. But I had that other sucker to contend with. Naturally, if you was wanted me for a job, you'd go. I was 13 years with Dreyfus. First thing you'd think of, I'll go to Dreyfus and see what kind of fellow this fella is. Well, you know what he tells them?
No.
What he did? I didn't know this for years. I wondered what the difference. I wrote one year to every ball club in both leagues, offered to work 1 year for nothing if they would pay my expenses and give me a chance at one of those coach jobs. I know I could do it because I had that knack of judging the speed of a ball thrown against the speed of a man running. And in fact, in Pittsburgh under Clark, well, I coached a third of the time anyway, at third base. And, well, I don't know whether I was wrong or not, but I always thought I knew what I was capable of and didn't try to overdo it. But
Why did Dreyfus not?
he'd just tell him, well, he's a good fella, handles everything good judgment, but you can't get along with him. Now, what are you going to do? Well, of course, he and I didn't get along, that's all. But the reason we didn't get along, I was going to tell you, is because he sent for me one time. Of course, I lived in Cleveland, and my first wife she died when the boy was 8 years old, and I couldn't have her with me. She had heart trouble, only one beat of the heart. And I wanted to be where I could get home any time they called me. In fact, one Decoration Day, she was sick. I had her over in Pittsburgh with me, and the boy got diphtheria. And in fact, they had given him up. We were on the road and they'd sent for me. And when I got home, he had a gold tube in his throat. And they couldn't get it out. He'd choke right up. And then Decoration Day, now I don't never want this repeated. This is something that I should never say anything about. But we played morning and afternoon then. I played in the morning game, and they had a cab set at between the entrance between the grandstand and bleachers, set there, and a telephone open with my wife sitting at it, and a boy at the phone in the ballpark. And I played both games. He never even said thank you. Of course, I never forgot that, him being the man that put me up there.
Yeah.
Ordinarily, I know today what they'd do. They wouldn't even go to the ballpark. But I had assurance from the doctor, and I had the best I could get a hold of there in Pittsburgh. And he told me as long as the tube was in his throat, he says the only trouble now is getting it out without him choking. He says he's all right, he's on the mend. And I told him what Dreyfus wanted. He says you won't be taking any chances. So I had that much assurance anyway. But
The boy recovered.
oh yeah. He'd be 65 years old in July. He was 6 or 7 then. He lives right across the lake.
Yeah, right. You faced Christy Mathewson a lot of times.
I'd rather hit against Christie than any man I ever hit against.
Now, why is that?
because I hit against him opposite to what all the rest of them did. And I couldn't make them see it. In 50, last time I saw Fred Clark, he made the remark about that. He says, I never saw a man hit another man like you could hit Christie. Well, I says, if you fellas done the same things I did, you'd hit him just as good.
What did you do?
When Christie got in that box and looked at you, then he'd turn around and he'd look where every man was playing. And if he wanted you to move over, he had to move. And if he wanted you to go the other way, but you wouldn't get a ball you could hit to that other field. You'd have to reach out or back up or do something to hit to that other field. So I thought, I ain't going to get a ball that I can pull to that open field or slice over there. So I'm going to hit the way he's got him playing me, making me hit. And I did.
And it worked.
It worked. We had 2 or 3 fellas on the ball club. As soon as they'd see Christie warming up, oh, what's he use? And I'd tell him, why you hit this fella? That fadeaway, you know how many of them he ever threw to me? 1.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he let it get away from him. I'll give him credit for that. I hit it down the left field line for 3 bases. And I don't know, somebody on the bench that says, you must have known what he was pitching. I said, no. I said, I knew where he was going to pitch. And I stepped back and hit it.
I haven't mentioned the fact that you led the league in home runs once.
Oh.
How did you do that? How did you lead the league in home runs?
Well, I tell you, there were big fields, and if you hit a ball between them, if you was fast enough, you had a home run. It was no over the fence. I played in that same ballpark 10 years, and I never saw but one ball hit over the fence in the 10 years. That was the old Exposition Park in Pittsburgh. That was a real big field.
Yeah. You hit them between them and made 6. It was 6 home runs you led the league with, if I remember.
Well, of course, no, I didn't hit them all there. I think I hit 2 of them in one day in Boston. I think I hit 3 of them in one series over there. That was funny. Of course, I was young. All I was playing for was trying to hit. I didn't even know. It was 5 years after I knew I led the league that year.
Is that right?
And I had something happen in the World Series.
In the 1909 World Series?
No, 1903 this was. I think I hit, it was either 8 or 9 runs in that series. That was 1903, and you know when I first heard of it? 1920.
Really?
Somebody hit one more than I had, and it come out in the papers that this fella hit 1 to beat my record that had been held up since 1903.
I'll be darned.
And I was managing in Lakeland then, and I happened over there one day, and 3 or 4 of the players that I would get jobs in the winter and stay down here. And one of them happened to be in the president's office. He run a drugstore there, the president, and he happened to be in there when I went in to see him. And he said, why didn't you tell me about this thing you hitting all them home runs and all that stuff. I said, I didn't know it myself. I said, we didn't keep no records in those days.
You had 4 triples in that 1909 World Series, too.
That was 1903.
That was in 1903?
You know how they covered that up? They give it a Tris Speaker, but he had 14 games, and I did it in, well, I did it in the first 4 games. But he had to go 2 series to even tie it. And he got credit for hitting 4 home runs for all that time in a World Series. Of course, my argument is, I don't care how long the World Series is, it's a World Series.
Yeah.
Now and they're trying to change it now because this kid beat Tykov's stolen bases. Because Frick don't want it that way. Just like this fella on the home runs. He had to go 62 games, I think it was.
Right.
162.
Yeah.
And
To beat Ruth's 154 game record.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now they want to say a World Series. Well, just last year, I didn't know this. A fellow called me up. And no, there's a fellow come up. They shuffled down here, and this fellow was shuffling down here, and he was a real old timer. And I got a brother-in-law down there, and he got talking to him one day while the shuffling was going on, and he asked where I lived. He said he heard I was living here, and he showed him from down there how to get up here. He come up, and gave up his shuffling to sit here and talk. And so he said, I just read in the paper where you led the league in in assist as a third baseman. I forget what year it was. It's a long time to have that stand up. Well, I says they made more than that in the American League. I says, I didn't even know it myself because I wasn't interested. All I was interested in was making good. I says those records didn't mean a thing to me because there's too many big fellas for me to try to beat records. I says if I had them, it was accident. I just happened to do it and didn't know it.
Sure.
And I said, of course, it don't hurt anything, but there is one thing. I've got a bad reputation. I ain't going to get nothing. I don't care what it is. They ain't going to give me no credit. And
Why have you got a bad reputation?
huh?
You have a great reputation.
All but Pittsburgh.
Yes, but really you have a great reputation.
I'm going to show you something. You can't let this out.
Okay, the tape is
Come on.
going to go off in a second anyway.
Huh?
I'll shut this off anyway.
One reason I don't go around baseball much, like looking at a ball game. My wife says, you shouldn't look at them. I says, why? I said, that's one thing I can do is look at a ball game and don't care. I says, I think, now I'm not conceited, but I think I did more for baseball than baseball ever did for me. And I said, I want to stay that way. Well, you see too much. I says, that's what kept me. I says, of course, I was a lucky boy when I run into Fred Clark. I probably wouldn't have stayed in the league if I hadn't run into him. And I don't know. I played my minor league baseball right in Cleveland with those old timers.
Mm-hmm.
You see, I didn't drink, and they all played for their beer. And I'd go in and play any place I wanted. I preferred shortstop at that time. And, we had a club there, played anything under 18. And we couldn't get nobody to play us.
Yeah.
Nobody could win from us. And I'd pitch as many games as I...
Is that right?
And, I don't know, it just seemed as though, between my father and what I thought of the Delahanty family, I was bound to want to play ball. Because my father always, after that Delahanty affair, he used to go down to watch us. And then it wound up, my brother and I, he was 4 years older than I, but we both played on the same club. I begged him, and you probably know of Bert Shotton. He played with him. And he made a remark to me, Bert was managing some club up in the International League. And they come into Buffalo, and that's when I was scouting. And Bert was in the lobby of the hotel when I went in there, and I went over and talk to him. Of course, I didn't know Bert, what you call chummy or anything. It was just played against him where he'd managed and that, and talked to him different times about players that he had under him when I was scouting. And the first thing he asked me, he says, "You know, I often wondered about your brother." I says, "What about him?" "Well, he wouldn't play professional ball." "Well, I tell you, Bert, I was younger than he, and when he had his chance to go someplace, I was still in knee pants. But," I said, "I'll tell you one thing about him. Not because he's my brother, but I always said he had more chance than I had if he'd have taken it." And, that's what I've always thought, Bert said. He says, "I always thought he was a better ball player than you when you were playing together." Well, I says, the difference was he had a family. And I was a kid. I wanted it. And he wanted to take care of his family. And you couldn't on what they paid those days. Now, my first salary was $35 a month and board. My first salary in the big league was $5 a day.
$5 a day?
$5 a day, $150 a month.
How much did they get when they sold you from to Louisville?
I never was sure, but I wouldn't want to say.
You didn't get any cut out of it?
No, they never thought of giving you anything out of it.
Why do you think it says on that thing that you were the brainiest ball player in the big leagues? Why do you think it says on that newspaper clipping that you were the brainiest ball player in the big leagues?
On account of my size and everything. And, well, I don't know, I just couldn't help it. If I'd see Clark something I didn't like, it's none of my business, but I had to tell him. I couldn't help it. And he looked to me for it and thanked me for it a lot of times. But I don't know, I always thought everybody played as much with their head as they did with their hands and feet in those days. You couldn't do anything.
What was different? What was different about, or what is different about baseball today compared to baseball back in your day? But let's say all the way back in 1900.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I don't call it baseball today. Show me outside of cleat fall, the third baseman for the Yankees.
Clete Boyer.
Boyer, yeah. Of course, I had a proof point one time. They put me under a grandstand, and they was having batting practice. And now this is going to sound like boosting yourself, but they put it up where we were kidding each other and arguing and sitting up in the stand watching batting practice. That's when I was still playing then. And they asked me how I got the start on the ball all the time. Well, I told them, I said, from the time I can remember when I was barefooted, I used to have fellas hit balls away from me that I had to run after. And I'd run to see how close I could come without looking at it to see where it would hit the ground. Now I says, I did that when I was in grammar school. I said I had no reason to do it, only I liked to run. And, well, that still don't give you that start. Well, I said, if I can see that batter and he hits a ball, all I got to do is have that one glimpse of him, and I can tell you which way that ball's going, whether it's this side or this side. And I start and run that way, or this way, whichever it happens to be. This one fellow said he can't do it. He says, right down below us is a knothole, under the stand. Go down there and let's see how many you can tell. Why, says of course, all I can see there would be the batter. And I have to go without seeing the ball coming. Well, let's see what you can do. Well, I said, how long do I have to stay down there? They said about 5 minutes. I said, all right. I said, I want something to sit on then. I ain't gonna get crouched down there. So I said, you holler when the time's up. So they hollered. I called each time he hit the ball, I called which way, going right, center, or left. When he hollered, I come up and, well, you convinced us. I said, how many did I miss? He says, you didn't miss any. Called them all. Well, I said, there you are. I said, another thing, I was always a runner. Always wanted to start quick, stop quick. All done as a kid. I didn't have to go through that when I started professional ball. I knew it. And I said, maybe that's the reason that, well, I played 1 year in the minor league, that's all.
Tell me now why you don't call it baseball today.
Don't what?
Why don't you call it baseball today?
Well, for the simple reason, you ever see a players play for a certain hitter, certain way?
Not so much.
Huh?
Not as much as they used to, I guess.
I don't see them do it at all.
Really?
If Mickey Mantle, if I was playing against center field against Mickey Mantle, I would play him right straight away, right or left. Scour him, the same thing. I'd make my shortstop, if I had the club, and second baseman come in, both of them towards second base. I'd make my first baseman play in closer. I'd make my third baseman play in closer. That's the way I'd play. If he hits a ground ball, it's right through that box. You never see him hit a ball hard, left-handed towards third base. You never see him hit a ball hard, right-handed towards first base. That is, I never had. And, well, that was, I got an idea that's why that was put in there, because I played a man. And when I shifted for a man, I didn't shift from here to the door there, like you see them now. They'll move just about from here to the door. Nat Rucker asked me one time on that. He says, I never saw you move for one player to another field for another one unless you went at least 100 feet.
Really?
Well, I says, when I was still in the zone, and I says, if I am playing a man in left field, that I'd, and next man comes up, he's a right field hitter, what good is it to me to move over 10 feet?
Yeah.
I says, I'll move over. I want the distance anyway, halfway between that left fielder and this right fielder. That's where I want to be. Then I can cover as much ground this way as I can this way. Instead of having a big gap in there.
You figure that they played more with their head back in the old
Played
days.
more, yeah, they had to. Well, I'll show you a case. Now this sounds like as though you're trying to give yourself a boost. Well, I went out of the infield in 1909. My last year in playing third base was 1908, and I had a written agreement that they wouldn't ask me to play the infield again. I'd been hurt, my side, and I couldn't get down and up again like I used to. And I knew it was a case of getting that outfielder get out. And I wound up, played 152 games at third base. Now that's the difference between Dreyfus and myself. We had a chance to win pennant. And I tore up that agreement, or ignored it. And we come within a half a game of winning the pennant. That was the year that Merkel affair.
That's 1908. Yeah, that's the year
1908, yeah.
If you'd won that last game from the Cubs, you would have won the pennant.
Won the pennant, yeah. And that was my last year on the infield. In, let's see, I went to the Cubs in 12, Chance was manager, Evers in 13, Hank O'Day in 14. That's the year. He wanted me to come back and play third base. Well, I'd been out too long. I couldn't handle the ground ball anymore. He hadn't got tired yet.
Well, that's good. I know you are.
And I told him, I says, Hank, I says, just think of my age and everything, and I've been out of the infield so long. I says, ground balls come different in the outfield. I'm used to an outfield position now. I used to go in the infield every once in a while and have balls hit to me just to keep moving or doing something. And I said, I don't think I can play it, Hank, but I'll try it if you want it. We had, didn't have a shortstop, but we had Heine Zimmerman could play short. And he wasn't that good hitter in there.
Jack Chesbrough about that time jumped over to the American League, didn't he?
New York, yeah.
Yeah.
8 of them went over one night.
Did they approach you about this?
Yeah, even Johnson said I jumped and jumped back.
What happened? Why didn't you jump?
Well, I didn't want to leave Pittsburgh.
They probably offered you more money in the American League, right?
Double.
Double.
Yeah.
Double.
But I had sickness in the family and had to live in Cleveland. You see, I'd get home in 2 hours any night. I just asked them, I says, well, they wanted me to sign for the same salary. And I told them no. I says, baseball is my living now, and I've got to make what I can out of it. I says, I'm on the square with you. I says, here's what they will pay me. Now I'll take $1,000 less and stay here. Well, Mr. Dreyfus, my friend, says, you ain't worth it. I said, well, that's all right, then I can go over. I don't care if you do go. Well, then I said, don't come around belly aching if I do go. I said, I'm giving you a chance. He wanted to give me $3,000 a year, and he offered Bobby Wallace $7,500 to come and take my place. Of course, that kind of galled me a little too. But that is, Bobby told me that afterwards. I don't know. That's all I know about that. But Johnson come out because I wouldn't jump. He come out and said I've already signed a contract and wouldn't keep it. Well, that's where I thought Dreyfus should have given my side of it. I didn't think I had any chance at my side. Because who's going to believe a ball player against a president? I don't care what's been done. They'll take the president's word. He ain't going to do it. But they finally, Barney did give it when he saw that I wasn't going to come. He gave me what they.
How'd you get along with Barney Dreyfus?
Ask my wife.
How did he get along with Barney Dreyfus?
Oh God, I could kill him myself. They never got along. Why he played, I don't know. I don't know why he ever stayed in Pittsburgh. He was one mean man.
That's what they all say.
Oh my, all he thought of was money, money, money.
That's typical of the owners, isn't it?
Yeah,
All the owners.
you're right.
No, I tell you, Barney was in one way, I give him credit for me being a big leaguer. I always thought if it wasn't for him, I'd never got up there. He come in and scouted me himself.
They didn't have real scouts in those days, did they?
No, it was just somebody telling him.
Yeah.
But Barney was cheap.
They were all cheap. They still are cheap.
They,
Something
Well-
about an owner. I don't know what it is.
why I say Barney was cheap, I don't know of any of his scouts ever sending as many ball players and doing him as much good as I did. Not because I myself, but I can give you the circumstances, and I think you'll say the same thing. I think he and John McGraw, either one of them ought to give me a job. They wouldn't do it. I come pretty getting one with McGraw, but Barney, no. And I told him one time, and I made him do it. I said, you're going to say no to me as long as you live. I said, I'm entitled to a job on this ball club. And I said, you've knocked me out of different places where I might have got a job. And I said, I'm going to make you say no and let people know it. And I did. He said no every year from that on. Now I just go over a man that he had a scout, yes. And after I left the league, see, I went to Rochester, Kansas City, Chattanooga, Shreveport, then I come down here. Because there was nothing in the minor league for anybody in those days. You're lucky if you come home even. So I had a chance to go to Tampa where I could come home every night. I knew I'd have more money when the season was over than I would any of the other places. But Barney, the first, I went to Rochester. That's where I should have stayed too.
That was after your big league career was over.
Yeah. But you can see how inconsistent the ball players, managers are. See, I was a free agent in 1916. And I wrote Miller Huggins, St. Louis. He didn't have an outfielder on his ball club worth keeping up there outside of Heathcote. And I made him a proposition this way that he'd pay my expenses through spring training. If he thought I was good enough to play regular for him, we'd come to terms and when the training season was over. If he didn't, all it cost him was like taking some high school kid to training. Well, he wrote back, and all he wrote was, we're looking for young fellas.
Yeah.
Well, I got that job in Rochester managing. And he didn't have no ball players. Well, I opened the season with 3 pitchers. One of them reported 2 weeks before the season opened, one reported a week before, and the one reported the night before. That's all I had to open the season. But I had a pretty good ball club outside of that. And McGraw was to furnish the ball players. Well, he furnished big first baseman.
Hulk?
Yeah, Walter Hulke. And I'd seen Hulke play in the International League and in exhibition games we played against him. He was a left-hand thrower and a right-hand hitter, and I never could figure it. I didn't know who he belonged to, but I knew he was a pretty good ball player. And he ought to go good for us. Well, I had Dreyfus, when he found out I was going over there, he had a shortstop and a second baseman out of a class. Now that was, well, just the same as Joyce went to AAA. But I think they called it then AA. It was either A or AA. But it was the same class players. And these two boys were from Ohio, Pennsylvania League, which was class either C or D. And they'd worked together all the year before. But I had no third baseman. That gave me a fairly good infield, and while Holke never hit over around 260 or 70, I always thought there was something wrong in what I'd seen of him. Well, McGraw had given up on Holke. He had him 3 years, sent him out every year, and now he sends him to Rochester to keep. And if he showed enough to come back, they was to pay him extra. Then McGraw was to pay the club, Rochester club, extra. And Barney sent these two, McCauley and Siglin was their names. And I hadn't got only Holke from McGraw. St. Louis sent a catcher, an outfielder, and I got another outfielder. I don't know where he was from. I don't remember who he belonged to, but he was just what I'd say a fair outfielder.
How did you like being a manager?
I would have liked it if the owners would keep out of it. But what made me quit the Rochester, you see, that was right after that Federal League. They, of course, I was always for a ball player.
How come now you didn't jump to the Federal League too, back in 14 and so?
I don't know, I kind of hate to talk about that. Bill McKechnie, through the First World War, Bill McKechnie got a hold of a club named Toronto, Ohio, one of those mill towns. And every Sunday, we had a bunch. Well, there was Hannes and myself and a fellow named Shaw and Scoops Carey and Slapnicka and some of them I can think of, some I can't. Walter Cooper. Is it Walter Cooper? Anyways, that left-hand pitcher for Pittsburgh, we had a ball club could play most any place. And we went down to Toronto every Sunday. He paid the pitchers $50 a game and us fellas $25. That's how Bill got managing up, and nobody could beat us. And I don't know what I played. Well, sometimes I play in third base, sometimes in the outfield. Well, I remember I played second base one game down there. They told me I wasn't playing second base, I was playing right field. Because I was playing too deep for them there, and for the hitters. And when the war was over and they all got going back into baseball, that's when Bill McKechnie went in as manager of Pittsburgh. And that gave me a start.
Do you think a manager is very important to a ball club?
It depends on the ball club. Now, we had a ball club in Pittsburgh with Fred Clark. I can show you the difference in one that wants help and one that you do what I tell you to do. Now, Fred Clark, I don't believe, ever told me, after we got to Pittsburgh and I got in playing, ever told me what to do. And I don't think he told many of them. I know he never told Hannes. He might say something to him, then sit down and laugh, because Hannes couldn't do what he wanted to do anyway. Of course, I always preferred them to tell me what they expected. But there was one thing he told me. He said, now, you like to think. When you go up that plate, you look, see what you think they're looking for you to do, and don't do it. Do something else. He says you won't get away with it every time, but he says you'll get more than you will the other way. Well, I says, Fred, that might go, but I says, now, I work a funny way with Mathewson. I see where he places his players, where he wants them to play when he's pitching to me. And I know I can't hit a ball any other place, so I try to hit where he's pitching for me to pitch. And I said, I've had pretty good luck with it. He says, you sure have. But he says, I'm going to leave it all to you from now on. But I never went up the plate. I didn't go to him and ask him.
Did the ball players call him Fred or Mr. Clark?
Fred.
Did they call McGraw Mr. McGraw? I think they did, didn't they?
Mac.
The ball player, to his face, they'd call
Oh,
him.
yes, yeah. Frank Chance was another one the same way. Nobody wanted to call him Mister.
Did Clark have a sense of humor?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was with the boys all the time, and don't you think he wouldn't fight for them?
What about Frank Chance?
Frank, if he told you to do something, you do it. Try.
He was a tougher guy than Clark, wasn't he?
Well, I don't, in a way, yes. In a way, Fred was tougher. Frank would take more from a player than Fred would in carousing around. Fred, if he got a drinking man on his club, he didn't stay long. He was gone. We had one time there was only 3 men on the ball club would even drink a bottle of beer.
Is that right?
But Dreyfus used to get letters just the same about people, well, say somebody write a letter and say that he saw a certain ball player being carried into the hotel and put to bed. You better look into it. But one thing about Dreyfus at that, when he got one of those letters, he'd call you in and show you the letter. And laugh, because he knew it was a lie. He knew somebody else was, they had you mixed up with somebody else.
Yeah.
But
I remember I mentioned before about Ty Cobb and all the trouble he had when he broke in. Was that just mainly because Ty Cobb was Ty Cobb and a kind of a...
all Ty Cobb wanted was a room. He never went out of his way. If he slid to a base, he didn't slide to the base, he slid around the base.
Why did he have so much trouble? Why was he so unpopular?
Jealousy. Mostly. Of course, for my part, I was for Cobb for one reason. I expect he saved me from a pretty good beating one time.
How was that?
Well, it was in the World Series.
1909?
Yeah. They had Moriarty playing third base. Well, they had another infielder, O'Larry, I think his name was, Larry or O'Larry or something like that.
One of the Delahanty brothers was on that Detroit team, wasn't he?
He played second base. That
Yeah.
is Jim. That's the one I went to school with. We sat in the, well, either in the same seat or across from each other for a full term. Both of us were about the same age. There might have been a couple of months difference between us. But this game, I don't know, my hair was starting to fall out. Every once in a while I get it clipped all over. Somebody told me, which is foolishness, if I do that, and what was it? They had some kind of liniment they was putting on your head then.
Horse liniment.
Yes, it was a horse liniment. And this Moriarty, of course, he's a pretty good sized fella. I get on base one day, get around to third base, and that was a day that Jones playing first base. I think Chief Wilson ran into him and knocked him cold. And they had to take him off. Well, he never come to. They had to carry him off the field. And they put Sam Crawford playing first base. Well, I was on first when this play come up, and I went all the way to third. And I was standing there not thinking of anything, and this Moriarty comes over and kicked me in the shins. And I looked at him and I asked him what was the meaning of it. And he just walked away, he didn't say nothing. Well, I stood there. Of course, I didn't dare to get off the base because in those days, unless somebody called time, which they wouldn't do once a month, they'd get you out. And I had my back turned to him, and he come over and he grabbed my cap. Well, I started to laugh, and I said, well, I just had it clipped off yesterday. I was taking it as a joke. And then he reached up and slapped me on top of the head. And I turned around and kicked him in the shins. And Clem was umpiring. Clem and a fellow used to write newspaper stuff. I'll think of his name. But I walked into Clem and I said, Bill, you said Barton got hurt, and I had to come into third base after that. That's what I was looking out for. I said, now, Bill, I said, I don't like to complain, but I said, I don't want to be run out of this ball game. And I said, that fella is trying to pick a fight. Now, ordinarily, two fellas get into a fight, you want to throw them both out, no matter who's to blame. And I said, I don't like that at all. And I says, I'm not going to stand there and let this fella rough me up. And he says, what do you mean? I says, he's trying to get into a fight with me, and we both get out, and this other, they've got a third baseman sitting on the bench.
Yeah.
We've got nobody. Well, that passed off. And then Bill Epstein got around there in a later inning, and he started on him. And Epstein, of course it was laughable afterwards, Moriarty's got the ball in his hand, and he come up and kicked it Epstein, and Epstein off the bag after him. And Moriarty run away from him. Instead of going up and touching him and getting him out of there, and the score was tie at the time, and we were trying to get that winning run over, and the series would be over. Well, after the game, I don't know, Moriarty and I started riding each other. And after the game, we used to come out, have what we call sneakers, and we take our ball shoes off and put these on to go to the cab or whatever we was riding in. I was sitting on the bench, looked up, and it was all gone but me, and I just wound up putting my sneakers on, and I got up and I looked up, and Moriarty's halfway across the field coming over. And, well, I couldn't run, that's all. I just looked around to see if I had any help anyway, and our fellas all gone. And I got up off the bench and I took a step or so towards him, and I heard this voice. I say, he says, "Where are you going?" He says, "I'm going to give this fella a lesson." Cobb said, "No, you're not." He says, "I don't know why it is that you're always ready to pick on the littlest fella you can find. But," he says, "you see what he thinks of you now. He ain't running away from you, but you got to take me first." Well, that stopped it. And he turned around, Moriarty, he says, "Get down to the clubhouse where you belong." He says, "You ain't got no business out here." Well, of course, the next day we wound up the series, and there was nothing happened that day.
You think the ball player that day was a tougher character than the ball player today?
He might have been in a way, because he didn't have, the ball player is what we call sandlotters then. None of them had an education. There might have been one or a few, now like Roy Thomas, he was a college man. Fred Tenney was a college man. And, I guess there might have been 4 or 5 college, boys that went to college and come up to the, now Tenney, I think, come right out of college into Boston.
Mathewson.
Yeah, Matty come from,
Bucknell, I think.
yeah.
Well, do you think they were rougher kind of people than they are today?
No, but today they do it in a different way. And the umpire let them get away with it. That's what makes it look bad. Now, in '49, Casey won his first pennant. We happened to be in Philadelphia on this certain day, a game. They had Johnny Lindell playing left field for the Yankees. They had little Nellie Fox playing second base for the Athletics. They come down to the 9th inning. Philadelphia is 1 run ahead. I don't remember who was pitching. But Lindell is on first base, and the Yankees get 3 men out. I never can think of the shortstop's name that played with Philly then, but he later managed for a year or so. Managed Phillies. the athletics rather. And there's one man out, and the ball is hit to this shortstop. He comes in on the ball. Fox comes across to take the play at second. The shortstop throws the ball to Fox. He catches it a step away from the base, steps on the bag, goes over about from here to that door, trying to get away from Lindell. And Lindell hits him and knocks the ball out of his hand. And 2 of those runs score. Now he was from here to there, toward third base, out of the baseline. And the umpire, they had 4 umpires. He shouldn't have been any farther away than from here to there. Well, this shortstop, I looked to see what they were going to do, see if they were going to make any kick. The shortstop starts on the run towards him, and the umpire looks over at him, and he starts on the run this way. Shut him up before he ever had a chance. And that was the runs that won the pennant for Casey in '49. I had the picture of that, and I don't know, I lost it somewhere. After we come back down here, we got a Look magazine, and going through it, I saw this picture, give the whole thing. And the caption underneath was, Johnny Lindell gets credit for 2 runs, butted in.
Well, they played rough in your day too, though, didn't they?
Well, she got in the way, yes. But we got in the way. We never said a word, no matter what they'd do. They'd knock you down, but if you got your point, now like, say a man on second base, I was playing third. I never let that man go clear of that base. I walked over and straddled the base. Made him go around me. Well, I've got hit. And one fella, we made a joke out of it, of course, but I just tried to pull a stunt, and he kind of showed me up. So there was, neither of us hurt, and he came back and apologized, which he had no reason to at all, but he was a big man. And of course, he took the attitude he was too big to fool with me, and when he come up there, he just took his hand and put it under my chin here, like this. He's running, coming from second, trying to score on a base hit, and I'm trying to make him go around me. He flipped me right out in the coach's box. Well, when the inning's over, he come by me and he says, "Kid," he said, don't try to block those big fellas, because one of them's going to hurt you. I said, "All right, I won't." So I changed a little on that. I stood a little on the inside and watched him, and just as he went to do something, I'd step out of the way. And I've had him stumble over that bag that where I'd be from here at that chair away from him. They couldn't claim interference, but we get the man. And
Were the ball players in that day more durable kind of people? That is, tougher in a sense that they could keep on playing day after day despite physical
you'd be
injuries?
surprised.
Yes,
Yes, they were.
my husband did it when he had me on the bench.
I played a game one afternoon. I had a fever of 105. We were going to New York that night, open up the next day. The doctor, where I was living, they'd got a doctor in because I was going out there. We didn't leave till 10. And he stuck with me all evening. And he come down to the train. And Dreyfus and Clark both, he got both of them, tried to talk them into leaving me home. But Dreyfus said he had a doctor, his doctor in New York, and he'd have him in the next day. As soon as we got in there, he'd have this doctor in. He did. The doctor looked at me and he says, you can't get out of here today. He says, I'm going to give you something to kill that fever. Well, by nightfall, the fever was gone. He killed the fever. That evening, Dreyfus come in to see me. Wonder how I felt. I said, well, I think the fever's gone. He says, I'm going to ask you to play tomorrow. Well, I says, I don't know whether I can or not. I says, I'm awful weak. Well, he says, we had to put Harness on third base today and he lost the game for us. I says, you're taking a pretty poor man out of there to put me in it. But I went out. I played that series there. We went to Boston. I played that series, and then we come over to Brooklyn. And the second game in Brooklyn, I fell down running to between second and third. And he had to take me out then, and he sent me home. We were to go to Philadelphia, and I went right on through to Pittsburgh. And he sent me up to a hotel. I think it was Cambridge Springs, if I'm right about it. And I stayed there a couple of weeks. But that's the way it was. I played, after that, that's when I hurt my leg and I couldn't play anymore. But we got down 10 days before the season was over and we were out in the lead. All we had to do was win 3 more games and we win the pennant, the first pennant they ever had in Pittsburgh. So we were playing Chicago and they asked Chance if he would give us a runner. Give me a runner if I got on base. And well, he did the first day, and we won the game, and that put us one less we had to win. That day he said he couldn't do it. Said if I could get in there and play, he says, circumstances won't let me. Well, along in the latter part of the game, I remember I get a base on balls and I went down to first base, and Frank was that kind of a fella. If he did something he thought to hurt somebody, he'd try to make it up to him. So he apologized for and explained why, that they were in second place and fighting us. And I told him, all right, I says, I didn't expect you to even give me a runner yesterday. I got no business out here. And
What was the matter with your leg then?
I pulled the cord loose up in here.
You couldn't hardly run, but you were playing third base.
Yeah. I couldn't. If I run any further from here at that door, I'd fall down. My leg would drop out from under me. But I could feel, I could move. But when it come to run the bases, well, he shifted me down next to the pitcher in the batting order. And Chesbro was pitching this game. And Jack was, no, I was the catcher. I was ahead of the catcher, then the catcher and Chesbro. So O'Connor was our catcher. He made a hit. Ordinarily, it would have been a two-base hit. I got to second base. Then Chesbro come up, and he hits one. Got between the outfielders. I got to third base. It took 3 hits to get me from first, and any one of them would have been more than a single. But we won the game, and it set us all right, so he said I could go home then. So I did. But,
That was you were on a pennant winner then, for the first time.
First time.
1901, I guess that was.
Huh?
I guess that was 1901.
That was it,
Yeah, and then you won the pennant the next year and the year after that.
yeah.
Then how did you feel when you played in the first World Series, I guess, that there ever was?
That was 1903.
Yeah. Were you nervous before that?
Now I could honestly say I never got nervous.
Not even before a World Series
No.
game?
No. I can't say that I felt nervous. I might, waiting for a game. But as soon as that umpire got out there, to me, it's a fight to win.
Yeah.
In fact, that's been a bad habit of mine all the way through. I can't play any game. I can't play. I got to win.
Maybe that's why you like Ty Cobb.
I don't think Ty Cobb ever hurt a man in his life intentionally.
Was he the best ball player you ever saw?
Hannes.
Hannes was.
Hannes could play any place. Cobb could only play the outfield. And Hannes will run the bases if he went for a record just as good as Cobb. Cobb will out-hit him. That's the only point I could give him on.
What kind of a person was Hannes Wagner?
Another big boy. Just a big boy. He wouldn't hurt anybody.
Was he friendly?
Huh?
Was he a friendly person?
Oh yeah.
Did he talk much?
Not very much. He wasn't very, he'd pick his man. Now, some kid come on the club. Well, I was with him 13 years, never roomed a day with him. Of course, Fred had an idea there and stuck by it. He wouldn't put us old fellas room together. He'd put us with a young fella, but he'd always ask us. Some kid that's just coming in. Because in those days, you talked baseball. Now you can't talk baseball to these kids. Well, I'll give you an example of what kind of people are playing ball today. I was at the year Bill McKechnie, I think he acted as president, manager, bat boy, and everything else the one year. That's when they put Bob Quinn, in charge of the Boston Ball Club, and Bill McKechnie was managing. Bill carried that club half of 1 year, paid everything.
You were with Pittsburgh when Bill first broke in, weren't you?
Now that's a funny thing. I remember a lot of fellows I was with, but I don't remember Bill. And he played first base for us in 1911. I knew he was there, but I didn't know what years, and I didn't know what he played. I never could remember that. I asked him one day, I said, Bill, when the dickens did you play in Pittsburgh? Well, he said, I played first base for them in 1911.
Yeah.
Well, I said, that's funny. I said, I can remember a lot of fellows, but I don't remember you being there. Well, Wilbur Good just died here about, well, it's less than a month or so ago. And I was with him in Chicago and talking to him one day. He told me about having a tryout in Pittsburgh, and I was managing the club and Fred Clark was in the hospital. And I never remember the man being in the ballpark.
You were a member of the Pirates when Gibby broke in, weren't you?
I was put right rooming with him. Fred came to me and asked me to room with him. He says, we got to have a catcher. We got to, and all I want you to ever talk to him about is baseball.
Yeah, you were going to tell me about the kind of people who play today compared to the kind of people used to play.
Well, the people today, now they're wrong on a lot of things on the old timers. They say the old timers made it tough for a young fella to break in. It was just the other way. If they saw you make a mistake, from Clark down, they wouldn't say a word to you until they get you by yourself. And they'd say, you remember this play come up today? You made it wrong this way. Now this is the way you should have made it. Today, well, these young fellas don't want you around at all. But I'll tell you two different things that even the newspaper men don't want you around. Unless the club owners or anybody, unless you can give them some information about a ball player. Then it's all right. But
you said they used to room together like that so that they talk baseball all the time.
yeah.
Don't they talk baseball all the time now?
Well, I've talked to now Al Lopez will, because I managed Al down there in Tampa. Cuccinella was in Boston. Those are two fellas that I generally go, if I got a chance to say hello to them, I do, because I know them all as welcome. Most of the rest of them I stay away from altogether, because this is what they, well, I told you about what Huggins. And that season, I'll tell you that, I didn't finish that. After I had that club up there, I got a letter from him about June and around there, asked me if I would watch 4 different men in the league and give a report on them to him. I just sit down and wrote him a letter. I says, I'm not scouting for anybody unless it's a scouting job. Now, if you want me to scout these players, I don't care about managing. I'll quit and go scouting. But otherwise, I'm not telling you anything. Well, I never heard anything more from him. I know I wouldn't, because he was one of the kind that didn't want an old-timer around him. So afraid of his job. I had another fella. I could have had the job the year before, but wouldn't take it because they wouldn't pay the present manager up for the season. I said, you pay him and I'll finish out the season. No, we can't do that. Well, I said, what do you expect me to do? Take a man's bread and butter away from him? I said, I don't feel like it. Well, the consequences were, I was with that club when you asked me why I didn't jump the Federal League. I was getting paid well, and I was looking out for a job when I'd be through, which it couldn't be over a couple more years anyway. at the most. I was trying to work my end of it. Well, they came to me, called me up one day while I was having practice, called me over at the stand. He says, how do you feel about the Federal League? I said, I have no feeling at all about it. I says, it don't appeal to me in any way at all because it can't go. Anybody that jumps is liable to cut himself out of baseball for good. Well, then, would you sign a 2-year contract with us at your present salary? No, I said I wouldn't. I'll sign a 1-year contract because I'm, at my age, don't know whether I can play 2 years or not. I said, you ought to know how old I am. I was 38 then. But if you want to be sure, I'll sign a 1-year contract and forget about it. Well, he said, you come down in the morning, come down to the office in the morning, and I'll sign you up then. So I said, all right, and I went to the manager and told him, I said, I won't be out tomorrow. Hank O'Day was managing.
Hank O'Day, the old umpire.
Yeah. I said, Hank, I won't be out tomorrow in the morning. What are you going to do? Well, Hank, I said, you fellas have been after me about the Federal League. Will I jump? What the dickens would I want to jump for? Now, your president come after me, and I'm going down in the morning to sign a contract with him. Then you can forget all about it. All right, he said, you don't come out in the afternoon then. So I went down to the building where the office was. Now a lot of this stuff, you use your own judgment. I don't like it, wouldn't like it to come out because it's been quiet so long. And it wouldn't do me any good, wouldn't do anybody any good. I got out of the elevator, started towards looking for the number of the room. I looked around. The president of the club got off one down and walked over and went in his office. Well, that's what I was looking for, his office. So I just walked right on down there and walked in, and there were 2 or 3 fellas there getting ready for the afternoon.
Excuse me, Tommy, you folks have talked so long, wouldn't you like a drink?
Would you like a highball?
Oh, I'll join you if you have something.
Oh, he has it, don't worry.
Yeah,
He don't take a big one, but he takes one, thank you.
I take about one a month. You know, I was 42 years old before I ever tasted liquor.
I was 35 before I
It
ever
don't
had
do you any
anything but
good.
beer. You were looking for the president's.
Oh, yeah. So I walked right in. I couldn't see how he could get out of the room without me seeing him. Then I looked around, he wasn't there. I said to the fellow over at the desk, I says, Mr. So-and-so in? No, he hadn't got down yet. He says, I doubt if he'll be down here today. And I looked at him, I said, why lie about it? If he would change his mind, why wasn't he man enough to stop and say so? He knew I was writing back up. He says, what do you mean? Why, I says, he'd just come in ahead of me. He got off the elevator right out there. I wasn't over 5 steps back up. Well, he says, I'll show you, he ain't in. He took me in another room. I says, where's that door go to? Oh, he says, that goes out in the hall. I said, I thought so. I said, you just tell him I was in. And I went on out, went out down to the hotel where I was stopping. I never paid any more attention to him.
Yeah.
But I told him, I said, in talking to him though out at the park, I says, I don't believe you know how old I am. I says, I don't know whether I can go 2 more years or not. And I says, I don't like to sit on the bench. I says, in the first place, well, that spring, when we were in the South and come up home, he sent for me and he wanted to cut me $1,000. That was before, well, we hadn't had a payday yet. And I was sitting on the bench. He had 6 outfielders to play. Johnny Evers was the manager, nuts. And he didn't want no old fellas. Well, I argued with the president. I said, now, his name was Murphy. I said, Mr. Murphy, I know you ain't gonna like what I'm gonna tell you. But I says, I can't help it, I got to tell you. I says, you need somebody up in this office who knows something about baseball. He said, what do you mean? Well, I says, I've been in baseball quite a while. Did you ever raise a man after you had him signed to a contract? Do you know of any president that ever has? I don't know, he says. Well, I says, you got this ball club for nothing. You paid for it the first year you had it. And still, you want to cut the ball player even after you got him signed. Who made the salary? Did I ask you for anything? No, he says, you never have. I says, I've always signed at your figures. And I said, I've tried to give you everything I had. And I said, I'll make you a little bet. Now, I'll take $1,000 cut on one condition. That if I'm in there regular before this season is over, you give me that 1,000 and another 1,000. That's a bet. He looked at me and he said, do you run this ball club? I said, no, I don't, Mr. Murphy, but I wish I had it for just 1 month. I said there'd be some changes made.
Evers wasn't a good manager, huh?
Oh, Johnny was all right. The only thing with Johnny, he was too smart. He could sit down and figure out a play that it took every man to think the same thing at the same time and make all of them make that one move at all together, and he could make the newspapermen like to talk to him because he talked these plays. And none of them could never be made because you couldn't get the men to think that way.
Yeah.
So, I knew he wouldn't last over a year because he wanted to get rid of all us old fellas. And I told, 3 weeks after I was in there regular, I knew it. It had to come. They just didn't have him. And I knew it, even at my age, that he couldn't keep me out of there unless he just simply wanted to tear the ball club to pieces. There were 2 of us that he had sitting on the bench, and he had the places filled with minor leaguers. He was going to have a young ball club.
You played for Clark, you played for Chance, you played for Evers, Hank O'Day, and a couple others, I guess.
Buck Herzog.
Buck Herzog, yeah, with Cincinnati, right?
Yeah. That was my last year regular.
Who was the best manager you ever played for?
Well, naturally I favor Clark.
Was
But I'd take, there's three there. McGraw, Chance, and Clark. Any one of the three of them was you'll like to play for.
Did you play against McGraw when he was a player?
Yeah.
How good he was a third baseman, wasn't he?
Yeah.
How good a third baseman was he?
The average, but he was a kind of good hitter.
Was he?
Yeah, he hit that ball wherever he wanted. He'd stand up that plate, he just tapped at the ball this way. You could pitch a ball outside to him, he'd pull it down that first baseline. Same way, no matter where he wanted to hit, he was going to hit there.
He played for Baltimore with Robinson and the rest of them.
Yeah.
Was that Baltimore Oriole team a rough team like they say it was? You know, they'd say that was the roughest team of it.
Oh, they say all of them are rough. It wasn't the team that was rough, it was the spectators.